Questions for reflection. The story of Joseph in the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, is an example to us of how the Lord can use one good man or woman, totally dedicated to Him, and staying faithful even in the face of horrible treatment and adversity to accomplish His plan. Betrayed by his brothers because they were jealous of him, they intended to kill Joseph. Instead, they sold him into slavery and concocted a story that he had been killed by a wild beast. Joseph ended up in Egypt. But as the account continues, he did not give up. He did not surrender his faith, give into a victim mentality. Instead, Joseph learned how to live in a difficult situation and, relying on the God of Israel, prospered, even eventually rising to power in Egypt. Now, we all have experiences of being betrayed. We're sometimes tempted to give up, perhaps to succumb to seeing ourselves as victims. The story of Joseph invites us to reject victimhood and to true conversion of heart, mind, and lifestyle. The season of Lent is a great opportunity to ponder our own life, our reaction to adversity, and the true strength of our faith in the Lord. Are we carrying out such an examination of conscience during these 40 days? In our responsorial psalm appointed for today's Mass, we hear David singing of the example of Joseph. Feet were weighed down with shackles. His neck was put in irons. In due time his prophecy was fulfilled. The word of Yahweh proved him true. Joseph was a man in a deep relationship with the Lord. He had the spiritual gift of discernment and was often used by the Lord to interpret dreams. Joseph ended up interpreting a significant dream of Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt. That leads to a relationship of trust between Pharaoh, the oppressor of Israel, and Joseph, the Hebrew slave. Joseph ends up actually being appointed by Pharaoh to be a ruler in Egypt. His wisdom leads him to encourage the storage of excess grain in that nation to protect against any future famine. And it was during his leadership that a famine did arise. Joseph ended up assisting the entire nation to survive this calamity. How do we react to difficult circumstances in our own lives? Do we turn to God first and ask for His assistance? Jesus used parables to communicate deep truths in a framework which His listeners would understand. This parable of the vineyard owner is a great example. The vineyard is the world and all who live in it. God the Father, the Creator, is the vineyard owner. Israel, and by analogy all of us, are the servants sent into the vineyard and called to be good stewards. The behavior of those left in charge is caused by their sin. They rejected God's law, His prophets, and His call to stewardship over creation and over the crown of creation, men and women created in the image of God. But, then the parable continues, the vineyard owner sent his son, and they rejected him, killed him in fact. Here, the prophetic nature of the parable of the vineyard is revealed. Jesus Christ, the Son of the Father, the Word through whom the entire universe was created, is the Son sent by the vineyard owner. They do not recognize Him. The religious leaders who heard this parable knew they were the ones He was speaking of. Jesus tells them with powerful, prophetic clarity, I tell you then that the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. And we are among those to whom that vineyard has now been entrusted. Through His passion, death, and resurrection, we have been grafted into the vine and made His people. The question for us during these 40 days of Lent is clear. How are we doing with all that has now been entrusted to us. Do we recognize Jesus? Are we being good and faithful stewards of the vineyard of the Lord?